This is Duke University.
Welcome to Springs Inside the Professor Studio. Today we have Professor Charlie Dunlap and 3L Ashley Watkins. Ashley has taken several of Professor Dunlap's classes and is very interested in issues about use of force and national security, which he teaches classes on. So she's the perfect choice to be our interviewer today. She's going to do an interview with Professor Dunlap, and then we'll open it up to questions from you all. So make sure you think of all your burning questions throughout the interview so you can get them in at the end. And we'll go till about 1:15. Thanks so much, and have a great interview.
Okay. Am I on? Oh, yes. Okay, so welcome, Professor Dunlap. Thank you so much for joining us for lunch today.
And I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. Given the competition on the third floor with the $1 million lunches, to come up here for pizza, I'm frankly.
Great. Okay, so first pressing question.
Tell Jason I said.
We'll send him.
I already sent him a hate note right before I came up here. Anyway.
Did you sign it, Major General Dunlap?
Yeah, that's one. Dude, that's one thing I want to ask you guys. Well, oh yeah, you're asking me questions. Okay, when I get to ask the questions, I want to ask you guys.
Okay. Well, we'll start at the very beginning, I guess. Where were you born?
Darby, Pennsylvania, which is in southwest Philadelphia. I was born in Fitzgerald Mercy Hospital.
Good. And did you grow up there?
And you want to hear the year?
Yes.
Okay. Here's what I want to see. I want to see shock and surprise. 1950. And I need to hear, that can't be true.
Sir, before you go on, can I look at your microphone? We weren't getting a reading downstairs, I'm sorry.
Well, maybe it's good that the last part wasn't on there.
Thank you, sorry.
And I grew up in Upper Darby, went to grade school for a while there. It's kind of interesting because I went to Catholic school all through law school, as a matter of fact. But you know how you hear people, they're like hyperventilating because, oh my God, there's 25 kids in the classroom. In my first grade classroom, there were 60 kids and one nun that was about half the size of Ashley. And believe me, she handled the whole thing. And one of the things about that is, there'll probably be an analysis for this, we were not allowed to erase in first grade. And you know, you had to learn the Palmer method, which is a way of writing. And if you made a mistake, you had to start all over again. And one time I did it, and I got all the way to the bottom, and I made a mistake, and I erased, and I put my elbow over it. You know, first grader thinking he's going to outsmart a nun. And she didn't even move she just whacked me. You know? Yeah. Corporal punishment was totally allowed. And then when I went to high school in Wilmington, Delaware, an all-boys Catholic high school, which is Salesianum.
Oh, okay.
Are you from down there?
Archmere.
Oh my God, that was our arch enemy. They were a lot smarter than we are. Are, whatever. But anyway, it just goes to show you how things have changed. I had to take music. You know, this was part of the thing. Everybody, the whole oblate thing where it's kind of like a Jesuit thing where you have to know something about everything. And I remember I was up on the stage because we had to go to the music thing. And I had to write a paper on the history of music, and I got a D on it, or an F on it. And I went up and I said, Father, why did I get an F? And the next thing I knew, I was laying in the, off the stage, on the floor, and I remember folding chairs were falling on top of me because he had just punched me and I flew off the stage. Can you imagine these days of that? Don't ever question my grades. And can I tell one more war story about going to an all-boys school?
Please. Literal war stories to follow.
You know what they used to tell us about, the priest used to tell us about women, or about girls? Or say, boys, take a look at their mothers, because that's what you get in 20 years. Think about that for a while.
Well, go home.
So if you think I'm messed up now, this is oh, and when you go to a big all-boys high school like that, sports is everything. You had to be on a team, or you had like no status in that. Oh, they used to divide you up. You took a test, and they put you in sections, section 1, section 2, based on how you did on the test, and it never changed through the 4 years. So, so you were kind of stereotyped wherever you landed. Which section do you think I was in?
1, clearly, yes.
Good answer, but wrong. I was in 2, and that has its own kind of thing. But anyway, okay, so I go out for basketball because, when you're young like that, you think you're a lot better at stuff than you really are. You don't even know how bad you are. And I went down there. There were 300 guys down there. And you had to make a layup, and if you missed the layup, you're cut. So they cut 150 people the first hour of the tryouts. And so I ended up being on the rest. I tried out for tennis.
Did you make your layup?
No. I had total performance anxiety, I don't think I even hit the backboard, because, I didn't realize how short I was until, I got in that group. And went out for the tennis team, made the team, but I wasn't any good. And I went out for the wrestling team and made the team. And I'm not a good athlete, but I did very, very well at that, because at that point in your life, it was more important for me to be successful at that. I didn't care if they killed me. Life was not, because you could not be in that high school without having some kind of, so this is taking way more time from your
No,
question.
this is the point, is to hear all about it. So wrestling was your sport?
Right. And, okay, we have the championship. And the coach said, okay, guys, nobody, I want you to get to bed early. I better not hear of anybody, no dates tonight, no nothing. Well, lo and behold, I had a prearranged ice skating date. So you can almost predict the story here. Well, we go ice skating, she falls down, breaks her wrist, spend all night in the emergency room, well, until about 3 or 4 in the morning, emergency room, because you know what it's like. And the next day I show up, and fortunately, my opponent that day was really bad. So then the coach, they could do almost anything they wanted to in those days. So he said, after the match, it's a tournament. He said, okay, Dunlap, go out and, I had to run 5 miles or something, because he had found out about that. And then, I did pretty well at this, so I thought, I'm really good at this. How wrestling, boxing, that's pretty close, right? And in Chester, they had the AAU boxing champions. So me and the other guy, we took a bus up there. We didn't know anything about boxing. We were going to be, well, it says amateurs, we're amateurs, we can do this. And let me tell you something. In my 12-second boxing career, it was one of the most painful rides back, because once of course I got knocked out in the first, so I'm on the bus going back, there's no ice, my face is coming out like this. And so it was a little bit of a testament to learn about things before you get too deep into them.
Did you get a hit in at all?
No.
One swing? No.
I didn't even see it coming. I mean, the last thing I remember, I vaguely remember seeing the other guy there, and this is about the last thing I saw. Next, there was a blur, and then pain. And then I remember thinking, when I woke up in the canvas, I thought this was supposed to be softer than it really is, because it's actually pretty taut if you've ever been knocked out in a boxing match. It's pretty tough.
Not yet, but maybe someday.
Yeah. Okay.
So after high school, what did you do after you graduated?
This is kind of interesting, because I went to high school in Wilmington, Delaware, Most people who went to my high school went to the University of Delaware, which is actually a very good school. My brother and sister went to the University of Delaware. But I wanted to go to St. Joe's partly because I was a big basketball fan, and at that time St. Joe's was, I didn't have this idea of even what I wanted to major in or anything like that. I got up there, I think like a lot of people at that time, I was kind of taking the path of least resistance. So my initial major was international relations. But part of that was you had to take a language. And so I took German because I had German and Latin in high school. And after my first year German, I switched out to history, which had no language requirement.
What did you want to be when you were younger?
Honestly, I wish I could tell you that I always wanted to be a lawyer, but it never really occurred to me. I'd always been in student politics and things like that. So that kind of came up. I do remember one time in high school they had a career day, and they had a lawyer come in there, and I still remember two of the things he said. One, at that point, I didn't even know how law school worked, and I thought 3 more years after college, when you're like a freshman or sophomore in high school, the idea of going 4 years to college and then 3 more years to law school just seemed like way, way too much. And then he said something interesting, which has stuck with me through all these years. He said, because he wasn't practicing, he was in business. He said, being a lawyer is kind of a disadvantage in business because you know all the things you're not supposed to be doing. And most people in business don't, and they get away with it. So what a wonderful message for high schoolers. But it stuck with me. When I was in college, it was during the Vietnam War, and there was a draft. And I think my draft number was 77. And they would go to about 110. And this is after they got away from all the college deferments and everything. So I wasn't political in that way. I didn't have any objection to going into the military. My father had been in the military during World War II. I was kind of fascinated by it, so I didn't have any I didn't think about it all that much one way or the other. So if I wanted to finish college, you had to join ROTC at that time. So I really wanted to be in the Navy, if the truth be told. But it was, the Navy ROTC was at our arch rival, which was Villanova, and there's no way at that time in God's green earth I was going to be going over to Villanova
Good
for
decision.
anything for ROTC. So Air Force was what it was, so I joined Air Force. Then, I'll tell you the truth. I got to be a senior. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And they said, well, you're going in the Air Force because that's kind of what you signed up for. And I was dating somebody at the time. I thought, this is not good timing for this. So I said, what can I do? They said, well, you can go to medical school or you can go to law school. And we'll defer you for 3 more years or whatever it was for medical school. Medical school was not a possibility. So I thought, law school? Okay, I'll do that.
So you went to law school for a girl?
Yeah. And strangely enough, she ended up going to law school after me. And she's now a judge, by the way. I don't know if she needs clerks or how that works. But, and of course, the whole relationship imploded in the 1L year. Nothing survives that.
As they are wont.
It's the nuclear weapon, nuclear explosion of personal relationships. But I wanted to go to the University of Pennsylvania and put in my application the whole 9 yards. Went down and saw them, and they said, well, Mr. Dunlap, we've already taken our one person from St. Joe's. You don't understand. We're a national university, and we don't want a bunch of people from Philadelphia. So I applied to Villanova, and Villanova, let's just say, is not Duke. And I got a scholarship, and I went to Villanova. And the scholarship paid for my tuition, but I had to pay for my room and board. And my parents were not all that encouraging about going to law school because my father didn't finish high school. My mother did go to college, but they thought it was a little bit, law school, a little bit frivolous. You got a college education. How come you're not earning money? Weren't you supposed to go in the military? Are you screwing off for another 3 years? You know, and oh, by the way, we're not going to help you with it. So I worked in the library. I was telling Ashley about this, I think, before. And I got this idea as a 1L that, you know, I'm sitting here with all these horn books. Man, if I just focus on the horn books, I am going to be fine. So I practically memorized the contracts horn book. Well, surprise, surprise, what I found out at Villanova anyway, what the actual law was an interesting idea for the professors. But what they wanted on the exams was their version of whatever the law was. So horn books were not were not especially. I found out later that one of the professors had written a whole like 50-page law review article critiquing the horn book and how it was terrible and wrong. And unfortunately, I took his class, and so it was.
Well, times haven't changed too much.
So
Except in your class.
We don't have a horn book.
Yeah.
So. And I was on the we started a rugby team there, and that was one of our big social outlets. Should I tell the story about the bar exam?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So meanwhile, during law school, I never worked at a law firm or anything like that, because after my 1L year, it was really, really a very, very difficult year. For one thing, I didn't have a place to live, and I kept moving these different places. First place I lived with an international student who could not speak English. She was my roommate, and I was in this really kind of weird neighborhood. And I remember I came home one time, and the landlady and her son, who I know now was probably like mentally disabled, but he was this giant guy. I came home one time, and she had her arm in a cast, and he had this big neck thing. I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Oh, the neighbors came over and beat us up." I go, "Why?" They don't like us." So, but, you know, this is not where I want to live. So I moved and it was in a really bad neighborhood. But I had a couple roommates, not law students. But every time I would come home, this was when the Philadelphia police, since you grew up in that area.
I grew up in that area.
Oh, well, the Philadelphia police at that time could do anything they wanted. I mean, literally anything they wanted. So I'd come home to my place, and I'd pull up, and police car would pull up, right? Step out of the car. Step out. The cops wouldn't even get out until you were spread eagle on, because they figured anybody in that neighborhood was buying drugs, must have been. And so I don't know how many times this happened. But then in our place, it was like a little fortress in that apartment, because drug addicts were always trying to break in. So anyway, but normally you flick on the light and they kind of scatter. But one time I flicked on the light. They were trying to the kitchen was sort of in the back. Flicked on the light, and the guy kept trying to break in. And I'm thinking, what? I said, "I got a gun in here." He says, "I got one too." So I ran out the front door. So then I moved to another place. And, okay, I'm walking home, because I didn't have a car at that time. And, I get mugged, and a guy I thought he had his fist, but what he actually had was an ice pick, and I couldn't see it, what an ice pick looks like. And so he was as nervous as I was, so he kind of like stabbed me a little bit in the shoulder. No real.
Just a little bit.
So anyway, I was a little shook up, so I thought, I'm actually going to call the cops on this. This is a little bit too much. So anyway, call the cops. The Philadelphia cops come over. The guy comes in. He's like, "You're really stupid for living here. You deserve it," and all this other stuff. And so anyway, we're in there talking, and the other cop that's in the car, suddenly, this is before they had all the they did have radios, but it wasn't like they're constantly. He comes blasting into the apartment with a shotgun because he figured his partner was in trouble because he was in there so long, and we were just, I think we started talking about like St. Joe's basketball or something like that. So anyway, and then, okay, so I thought, I am getting out of the city. I'm getting out of the city. I'm going to go up to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is north of Villanova. You know what I'm talking about. Chris, you can back me with everything I said. Okay, I see this thing, farmhouse. I'm thinking, this is great. I'm a city guy. I need to get out. I had a car at this time. So I go there, and yeah, it's a farmhouse, and it was actually a barn. And I said, well, where? He says, oh, yeah, it used to be our office, but now it's an apartment. And, well, apartment, they cleaned out the office. They had an office in the barn. And so you walked up these stairs, and it was just like an empty room. They said, it's unfurnished. And so I get like blankets and stuff. And no kidding, there was a rooster that would go up there and do the cock-a-doodle-doo thing right at like 5 o'clock in the morning. But the thing that freaked me out is the bathroom, such as it was on the first floor. Now, you probably, from Idaho, have been like on farms and
Oh, we
stuff.
all sleep in the barns.
Yeah, well, you know who else sleeps in the barns? Any farm people here? Rats. And let me tell you something. When you walk down there, like in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and you flick on that light, there's all kinds of movement and things running around and scurrying. And I'm thinking, I've had my country life. So then I finally moved to another apartment with some law students. But all this was a little disruptive of my concentration my first year of law school. So second and third year were much. Oh, you know how it worked then? Was, you know how the professors, and I don't know, maybe the 1L, they do this with 1Ls. They used to cold call a lot. It was all cold calling. And you could say that you were unprepared twice. And if you said, and you had to say that when they called on you, if you hadn't briefed, and there was a very structured way that they briefed the case. And if you weren't prepared to do it exactly that way, you had to say you're unprepared. And I got this bright idea, well, this is why God made the backs of classrooms. So, most of the professors had it was random, but it was a controlled random, and they kept track. And as soon as you hit that second unprepared, you better be, and they called on a lot more people. Maybe that's the way it is with 1L classes now, but a lot of people got called on. But anyway, that was my...
That was law school?
Well, and law school actually was, I didn't have a lot of good memories from law school. Oh, the bar exam.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
So-
a great memory for most law students.
Bar exam. Okay, so I wasn't working in any law firms because I knew I was going in the military, so I sort of had a job. And I worked as a lifeguard down on the beach during the summer, which was also kind of a story because I wasn't that good a swimmer. And,
Can you tell us a story of saving someone?
Oh, yeah, you actually had to go out and save people all the time in the ocean. People used to say, gosh, aren't you afraid of sharks out there? I said, no, I'm afraid of drowning. And they had a test too. And they didn't, all these guys would show up, oh, I got my Red Cross. They didn't care anything about that. It was a test. Imagine today, because what they did is whoever showed up, and it would be about 150 guys would show up. And they'd say, okay, we're sending one of our guys out there, and you just do the best you can with no training to see if you can pull them in. Well, okay, I go down there for the day of the test. I never forget, the water was 56 degrees, and I don't even like it when it's 80. But it was 56 degrees, and the guy who was playing the role of the victim was a Temple University football player, huge at that, he was a quarterback, huge at that time. He was about 220 pounds. He'd be small now, but 220 pounds. And I remember I got out, somehow, But the reason I was doing this is because for some weird reasons, I was living with another family with 9 kids, and the 6 girls came to me and said, "We want you to be a lifeguard." And guess why? Because they wanted me to introduce them to the other lifeguards. And so I couldn't go back and face that family. And I thought, I'm not going to survive this. This is the end. My life was fast. So I get out there, and somehow I pulled the guy in. And I was the number 25. They rated us from 1 to 300 or 1 to 150. I was number 25. So I was the worst swimmer that they hired that summer. But I later wrote an article about it because I remember very early on, and it was a life lesson for me, because the captain of the guards, he came up and sat on my stand with me for a while, and he said, you have more education than most of the people on the beach. I'm thinking, yeah, I probably do, because some of them were probably, And he said, if you ever think that you know more than they do, you're going to be dead. He meant literally, but I like to think of it figuratively at the time. Because you can always learn from somebody else, and no matter what their station in life. And boy, that really proved to be true. When I was in the military and just in the practice of law and everything you do in life, if you ever get to the point that A, you think you know everything, you're dead. Or B, if you think you don't have anything to learn from somebody just because they may not be a lawyer, they may have some other station in life, that's a huge mistake. And that has proved to be extremely valuable for me, because I'll never forget, every time you go overseas, like to Iraq or Afghanistan, you have to go to weapons training again. And I'd always forget what I had learned before. I'm not really a weapons person. But when you go through that, I remember one time it was a little airman first class, and she was maybe 19 years old, soaking wet, but she knew everything about that pistol. And when you're a senior officer and you're in a training session, all the junior people are afraid to ask questions. So I would always make it a point to ask questions. And that kid knew so much about that weapon. And as it turns out, it was one of the few times that, for some strange reasons, I didn't shoot anybody, but I actually had to pull out my weapon for the first time in my career. And it just goes to show you how important it is to have respect and dignity for people. I think as you deal with people, especially when you go to law firms and big situations, if you remember that, you always are trying to motivate people working for you. I found that the best way is just to treat people with dignity. And that's what most people, that's all they really want, is to be treated with dignity. And if you do that, if you treat them with dignity, I don't care if it's the guy cleaning up, you are going to be so much advanced in your way of living and you never know when that's going to come back and benefit. I would hope you do that just to be a good human being. But I can tell you there's a very pragmatic reason for it, because people come to respect you and they'll do all kinds of things for you if they just feel that you have respect for them. So anyway, getting back to the bar exam. So anyway, I developed this little lifestyle. They're about working on the beach, which, by the way, about 3 or 4 years ago, I went back to the beach and I walked in the beach tent, which is what they call the little building. There's still guys working on the beach when I was working on the beach, because they're teachers. And so every summer they come down and do this. And I hadn't been there for 30 years, and they look up and they say, "Oh, Charlie, you working this weekend?" No, I've been here for 30 years. I said, "Okay, yeah, I just thought, because the young guys are quitting, a lot of the old guys come in and finish up the summer." But anyway, so I didn't take the bar review course, because I thought, Pennsylvania, how hard can it be? Multiple choice, I was always really good at multiple choice things. It always proved that, how you get these exams. Oh, you're in the top, 1%. Somehow multiple choice, it was always easy for me, because somehow the answer would jump out. Not that I would know the answer, but it was more about the way the question or the options looked on the paper. It seemed to jump out at me. So I always did very, very well in multiple choice. Well, I thought, how hard can it be? So about 2 weeks before the bar exam, well, I got this notice from the Air Force that's basically said, if you flunk the bar exam, you're still coming in. And we're going to figure out something, and you're not going to like it. And so I'm thinking, ooh, this is putting a little stress on me. And I went to this party with some of my classmates, and I said, hey, what are you guys doing in that bar review course? Oh, negotiable instruments. I go, negotiable instruments? Is that on the test? Yeah, Dunlap, it's on the test. I didn't even take it in law school. And so I went in this panic mode. I drove up to Philadelphia. I bought the BRI book or whatever on negotiable instruments, took a week off from work, which I really could not afford, and just studied negotiable instruments. And you know the rest of the story, right? There was like one question on the multi-state, and then there was nothing in the essay portion of the exam. So anyway, fast forward, take the bar exam. One of my classmates, by the way, during lunchtime, we went out to lunch, and we're in the men's room. He says, hey, Charlie, you know a lot about this constitutional law stuff. Do you think that's going to be on the exam somewhere? It's during the break in the bar exam. I said, yeah, I think it is going to be on there. And he said, give me the highlights. Give me the highlights. Anyway, he's now a very famous trial lawyer in Philadelphia. But anyway, so we get to the bar, we take the bar, months go by, and it's about October, November, and there's this bar that all the law students went, and for some reason, I got my results a day before everybody else. And I went in there, and I was telling people, and of course they were all fascinated. I said, I picked up the letter, and it was real thin, and I got worried because, I thought, oh, thin letter, that's what you send, thank you for your interest in the Pennsylvania bar, but, so I opened the darn thing up, and I passed. And so somehow, you know how law students are, this got translated into, Dunlap says, if you got a thin envelope, you passed. You got a thick envelope, you flunked. Okay, 24 hours later, I go back to the bar. Dunlap! Some very un-Catholic schoolish language. Well, lo and behold, evidently, some people passed, but they still got a thick envelope because they hadn't done, that character stuff and all that other, and they were, apparently a few heart attacks had happened by people who go and they see this thick envelope from the bar thinking that they had flunked. And so anyway, then the school, Villanova used to always put up this list of all the bar review courses and what the pass rate was. And it goes, BR or whatever they are, 82%, 61%. No bar review course, 100% pass rate. But let me tell you something. I do not that was one of my stupid, immature, dumb things. And Pennsylvania had a very high pass rate at that time. It's like an 85% pass rate. And I thought, I can be in the top 85%. But it's much harder now, I understand. So if you're thinking about the Pennsylvania bar, are you going to take the Pennsylvania bar, Chris, or New York?
Maybe, yeah.
So I don't recommend it, but it's, anyway, okay, I guess we used up all the time. We're not even out of law school yet.
Okay, so let's skip to, so you joined the military, you're in the Air Force. How did that begin?
Well, I had to go to ROTC summer camp, which was in Alabama, and I'd never been south of the Mason-Dixon line in my life. And I'd never been on an airplane before I went down there. And this was during the Vietnam War, so it wasn't like it is now, where it was where now it's very, touchy-feely in the sense of, gee, you want to make this career, let us help. They didn't care whether you stayed or left or whatever, because there was somebody else to take and you were going in you flunked out of ROTC summer camp, welcome to the Army, welcome to Vietnam. And I remember I went down there, and imagine doing this today, what would happen? Okay, it's a bunch of college guys like me. We're trying to learn how to march. It's 90,000 degrees down there. And the guy who was in charge, we had one guy with a mustache. And you were allowed to have a mustache at that time, but he didn't like this. And he said, okay, how come you guys are letting somebody in your unit have a mustache? I don't know. I guess it's the rules, but, and so he made this kid run around the formation as we marched. And so everybody was trying to like slow down so this kid could keep up. And so anyway, the air officer in charge, he says, okay, you guys, you think you're funny? Go back and put on your winter uniform. And we had to go back and put on our winter uniform. And then we had to reassemble on the tarmac, which is the flight line, and just stand at attention. And they brought up an ambulance. And I remember with that winter uniform, and then they said, and button it up completely. And it was, I'm not kidding you, I didn't fall over, but that was, I think, as close as I came. I thought, you know. So anyway, I got through that, finished, commissioned, went to, and by the way, I'm going to do the commissioning ceremony here at Duke. And I'm going to get my uniform out, which I'm hoping has not shrunk in the closet somehow. And one of the customs is the first enlisted guy that salutes you, you have to give him a silver dollar. So you have to have, you know, all these silver dollars and so forth. But when I got down there, I used to have much longer hair. And I got my hair cut before I got on the plane, you know, before I left. And the first thing my sponsor gets down, I get off the plane, he says, Captain Dunlap, we're going to take you to the barbershop. So I go to the barbershop, and I report into my first boss. He takes one look at me and says, take him to the barbershop. I got 3 haircuts that first day. But anyway, as I've told some people, when I was in law school, I never took trial practice. You had to take either trial or appellate practice, so I took appellate practice. But I didn't take it because I stuttered a lot. And I didn't want to try cases at all. Now, lo and behold, the guy I worked for was a stutterer. My first boss, the head of the legal office. And he knew that this would be a problem in the military because you really do have to try cases. And my brother still stutters. But so anyway, he made me try cases. And I'll never forget, you know, the night before those trials, I didn't get a wink of sleep because all you can think of is, I am going to be completely humiliated. Because that time in the military, they were allowed to harass you all they wanted, you know, and I thought and you're alone down there, you don't know anybody, and but anyway, lo and behold, when I started, especially with members trials, which are jury trials in the military, if you stuttered, it was not a bad thing. Because they sort of had, on some level, thought, well, he stutters, he can't be one of these silver-tongued devil lawyers. And in fact, and so I started having all this success as a trial lawyer of all things. And so the more success I had, kind of the less I stuttered, so I had to try to put on this stutter. And I remember one time I was doing voir dire. I used to have this thing where I asked the members, will you hold it against the government or the defense? We used to go back and forth. If I stutter, and of course they go, no, of course not. And so automatically, and my opposition caught on, and this one guy was just driving him nuts. He objected. Your Honor, I object. Captain Dunlap's making me look like a silver-tongued devil. And he actually used that phrase. I kind of look at him like, oh, I didn't mean to make you look like that. Anyway, so I thought I was only going to do my 4 years, so I went to see the world. So I thought, Europe, I've never been there. That sounds like a lot of fun. And so I asked our assignments people, yeah, we'll send you to Europe, but you have to do a year in Korea. So anyway, so I was only my first assignment was in Shreveport, Louisiana. So then I went from Shreveport. And I'll tell you, one of the scariest things in my life, I remember when I first got down there, it was a nuclear bomber base. And they used to keep the bombers loaded with nuclear weapons on alert 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, they used to keep them in the air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to make sure that the Russians could not catch our entire force on the ground. but I was just on the base, and all of a sudden the siren goes off. Remember we were talking about the scariest noises? That it's this slow wailing noise. It's not like the sirens that you have here, and then all of a sudden these trucks are going, and they have this backup system just in case all the radios were out, where they would broadcast out of loudspeakers. It was a code, and it would go, we say again, Alpha, Zulu, Hotel, India, you know, and and the guys were writing that down because that would tell them where they were supposed to go and bomb. And so you see this, and then to get the bombers started quickly, they used explosives to start the engine. So you'd see all this smoke and this noise, and you'd see the bombers moving down. So you didn't know until they got to the very end of the runway whether or not then they do all clear. And you didn't know whether nuclear war was happening or not, or whether you were going to be incinerated in the next few minutes. And I'd never seen that before, so it was quite a shock. Anyway, I get to Korea, and can I tell the story about? Well,
you tell whatever stories you want.
This involves some rough language. Is anybody uncomfortable with that? Okay. At that time, I was single in that. We only had 4 women in the entire JAG Corps, one of whom was stationed in Korea as the defense counsel. Well, I arrived, and they gave me a case to try right off the airplane, and I remember it was on bad checks. I remember the kid's name was Cisneros. And I go after poor Airman Cisneros like he's Charles Manson because, you know, hey, I'm new, I'm going to show him I know how to do this. And she was the defense counsel, and, you know, we did so many trials over there. Let's just say she wasn't totally focused on this case. And so this kid gets maxed out. And so afterwards she comes up to me and she says, Dunlap, you know what I like about you? And here's my mind. I'm thinking, I have just gotten here. Already she's like hitting on me. She saw me in trial, must have been really impressed. And she was very attractive, I must say. And she goes, you know what I like? I go, what? And she goes, not one effing thing. Turns on her heels and walks away. That didn't work out. So anyway, and then after that, I went to England because, and you know, did the whole single little sports car. Oh, the first night I'm there in England, you know, they drive on the other side of the road. And my sponsor, he says, oh, yeah, I'm going to take you out, I'm going to show you. We go out to some pub, he gets really drunk, and he says, and of course I'm totally exhausted from the overseas flight, and he says, oh, I'm too drunk to drive. Here's the key. I get in the car. Of course, it's on the other side, and I'm trying, I've never changed gears with my left hand, and somehow we made it back. And that turned out to be a very good tour. And then I was there for 21 months, and I was assigned to our school. I wanted to be by now I thought I was Mr. Prosecutor. So I wanted to be one of our circuit prosecutors. And in the military at that time, if you said you wanted to do something, they'd find exact opposite, you know. So if you wanted to be a prosecutor, they'd say, okay, you're going to be in civil law. And so I got assigned to our school as a civil law instructor. But that actually turned out to be a great thing. That's where I met Joy, I met my wife, because at that time it was
How did you meet Joy?
Well, I was having a little trouble with my social life down there because I was from the north, and at that time it was hard to meet people. So I had been in some theater in high school, so there was a little theater thing. So I thought, this is great. And so I go there, and Joy was the star. And, you know, and that's how we met. She said, what do you do in the Air Force? I said, well, I'm a lawyer. And she never heard of that, so she thought it was just something I was making up to try to make myself look better. And so anyway, that's how we met in the theater. And so, and then we ended up, lived in 13 different places, different assignments around the country.
What foreign countries have you done tours in?
Just England and Korea. And then during the 90s, I was assigned to U.S. Central Command, which is in Tampa, but it's the command that controls the Middle East. And so I deployed for, I don't know how many times, but for lots of operations up through Iraqi freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. But the first deployment I went on was to Somalia. Do you remember Black Hawk Down and all that? Well, this is a little bit before Black Hawk Down. I'd never been in the field before because I was in the Air Force. I was a lawyer. And so I didn't even know how to put on my field gear. And lo and behold, they attached me to a Marine Corps unit, which could have been really, really bad, but they were very good to me. But one time, it really was such an eye-opening experience on so many levels. For one thing, it's the only time I almost really shot somebody. And I've told some folks about this, but it was in Somalia, and this is when they were first starting to throw grenades in the trucks and stuff. And these young Somali boys were over on the side of the road, and we pulled out, we were stopped for some reason, and one of them started running towards the vehicle. And I'm thinking, and he had something in his hand, and it was black. And I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna have to kill this guy. And so for whatever reason, partly because he was smiling and laughing, and he was just that much younger than most of the ones that are really dangerous were usually high on khat. They would chew khat, which is a drug. It's like an amphetamine. And this kid just seemed a little bit younger than that. And when he finally got up to the vehicle, you know what he's holding? There's a pack of cigarettes, that English cigarette that comes in the black box. And I'm thinking, you can see how people can shoot the wrong person, because if he really had an explosive, we would have been dead. But there were some other people I knew from the beach. They had all donated these clothes, and I got this letter from them, and they said, Charlie, could you go check to see if people actually got the clothes, this NGO? So lo and behold, I go up to this really obscure part of Somalia, and there were some Irish nuns up there. And they were young. They were like your age, Ashley. I mean, maybe a little bit older. And I said, what are you guys doing up here? Well, we have the orphanage, and then we have this hospital. I said, what's the hospital about? I walked in there. It was all mothers with infants with tuberculosis. It was just, and hospital is kind of it raises in your mind something that it really wasn't. And I'm thinking, and I asked them, what's the deal if you break your leg? And they go, oh, sister, what do we do if we break our legs? Oh, nobody told us. Well, we pray about it. In the military, we have a big operation plan and everything else. I said, well, let me ask you this. What about the clothing? Did you get any clothing from Cape May, New Jersey? Oh, yes, we did. Well, where is it? Because the kids were dressed in rags. Well, we put it on the children, and we fear for them. I go, what are you talking about? Well, every time they would put the clothes on the kids, one of the other clans would come in, and it's the only place in the world I've ever been, no matter how poor people are, they always love children, except here. Because if they were from another clan, these children were not even like human beings to them. And they were taking the clothes off of the kids so roughly that the nuns were afraid the kids were going to be hurt. So they left the stuff locked up, and the kids were running around these filthy, filthy things. So anyway, I really felt sorry for these nuns. And getting back on the airplane, and they said, oh, Captain, or Colonel, do you have any beer on that airplane? I said, Sister, well, as a matter of fact, we don't, but we have our MREs. And remember the flight mechanic says, well, sir, that's our emergency supply, blah, 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 in case we're trapped somewhere. I kind of look at it. I said, let me tell you something. I'm not. If we get an emergency, I'd rather be on the right side of a bunch of nuns than some bean counter back at base that, oh, you've lost your MREs. And so we gave them and the nuns opened them up, and they had there's those of you who've been in the military know what these things are like. But they had candy in them. The nuns were like squealing, "Oh, sister, look at this, M&M's, oh!" And all I could think of is, and then boy, we took off and we left them out there, and that's just real dedication.
So how did you become a judge?
Yeah, I was stationed in D.C. I eventually at the school became head of our military justice, the director of military justice. And so I was asked to do a tour as a military judge, and that was really an eye-opener. Now, most of the people that you have appear before you in the military, and it's a circuit. It was from St. Louis through the Azores, so you travel a lot, are not really criminals like you would think of. They're usually young guys, and mostly guys, who just do something stupid. Because when you think about it, at some point, they were good kids. At some point, they decided to serve their country. At some point, they raised their hand and swore an oath and did something. So generally, but then again, there were a few real sociopathic criminals. Like one of the cases I had, three cases actually stick out in my mind. One was a guy who raped his daughter. And his story, or it wasn't his natural daughter, it was his wife's daughter from a previous marriage. You know what he told the cop? She was coming on to him. She was 5 years old. Let's just say he didn't fare well. But you'd be surprised how many people, and I only gave him 25 years. 25 years in military prison for child molesting is not easy time. Because when you go to the military prison, you walk around the yard and you hear this, "Hey, Chester, come over here, polish my, Chester, do this, Chester." For Chester the molester, because the prisoners have their own little hierarchy. But this other case where this guy was, he was raping his natural son, which was unusual, even in this area, this type of crime. And I remember he said, "You know, the son," it was fully litigated, and the son was testifying, and he said, the accused raised his hand, "Judge, I don't like hearing this, and this is kind of upsetting to me." And I'm thinking, upsetting? Hey man, wait till we get to sentencing. That's when you're really going to be upset, and you have to do a big inquiry before an accused can be not present in court. And so we did the inquiry, and I gave him 35 years. But the defense counsel in that case gave the best sentencing argument I had ever heard, because I wish I could replicate it. It was the human being argument. Because believe me, it was an issue at that point whether the accused was really a human being, because the wife would hold the kid down while the accused was sodomizing him. But then I did have one funny case. It wasn't funny at the time. Well, it's more funny on reflection. This was a case right up here at Pope Air Force Base. In the military, aggravated arson is a death penalty offense. This case was aggravated arson. It wasn't referred as death penalty. They'd taken death off the. So I get down there, I'm thinking, holy mackerel, what is, it was arson of a barracks, because an arson of a habitable structure is extremely serious. Well, to make a long story short, you know what the kid really did? This is when you could smoke in the barracks. He put flash powder in the ashtrays because he thought it'd be funny if his buddies came along, put out the cigarettes, and there'd be a little flash. Well, the person who put the first cigarette out was the first sergeant, which in the military is like the disciplinarian. So it flashed up and it singed the wall a little bit, which made it technically aggravated arson. I'm looking at the prosecutor like, have you guys lost your minds around here? Because this is not aggravated arson, and we spent all this money. And so anyway, I found him, at that time, you could find him guilty of a lesser included offense. I found him guilty of disorderly conduct. And they put on the whole, I'm going to give the guy like 2 days or something. So they put on the whole sentencing case, and they had his brother testify, who was in the 82nd Airborne. and he's talking. You know, we grew up in the hills of Arkansas, and there was 10 of us, and we all joined the military. And I said, 10 of you, were they all boys? Yeah. I said, well, compared to what you and your brothers did when you were growing up, how would you rate this offense? And he's looking at me. He doesn't know what the right answer is. I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, he goes, well, Judge, to be honest with you, maybe a -1.
Okay, so I got to do my wrap-up questions, and then we'll...
okay.
Okay. So, first,
I'm
do you
sorry.
prefer to be called professor or general?
That's what I wanted to ask you guys. What do you think is better? How should I brand myself?
General's cooler. Definitely.
Who
General.
votes for general? My wife told me that that's what you guys would say.
Okay.
But I can tell you, other people think differently. Mostly on the faculty, but
General Dunlap.
because they're not. Hey man, watch the website. Everything's changing.
Okay, so what is your favorite word? These are the questions they ask everybody. I didn't just make these up.
Yes.
What is your
Yes.
least favorite word?
No.
There you go. What sound or noise do you love?
Yes.
What sound or noise do you hate? No.
It's easy to say no, but I still that wailing sound of a siren is in the real world what I don't like.
What is your favorite curse word?
I know other people have
Yeah.
not said this, but I have trained myself. Can I tell one quick story?
Yes.
No, I won't. No, about the movie.
Oh, yes. General Dunlap has a film career, in case you can IMDb him, and there's...
Yeah, I am. Make a long story short, I worked on a movie, and I was in Hollywood, and we're walking down to go to this meeting, walking down, and some secretaries tell a dirty joke behind me, and like the guy had of HBO Pictures, he glares at him, go to the meeting after, oh, Colonel, we need to talk with you. And I've been in the meeting, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I've cashed the check, what are they trying to do, And they said, well, we just want to apologize on behalf of HBO Pictures for the language that our administrative personnel used. I'm going, well, yeah, well, I said, yeah, I was really offended. And they go, well, we know that you officers and gentlemen are not used to having that language used in your presentation. I just got back from Somalia where I was attached to the Marine Corps. I said, I think I've heard a few of those.
So something you heard in Somalia,
Yeah.
maybe. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Attempt.
Boxing.
I wouldn't mind being a mountain climber because I have a real fear of heights, and if I could just conquer that, I think that way I'd feel much better about myself.
What profession would you not like to do?
What I'd not like to do? Law? No. I don't have a good answer to that. Because one of the things I found in life, especially in the practice of law, I was first really into military justice, then I got into operational law, and then for a period of time I was really into contracts, which I would have never thought when I went to. So, a lot of times you don't know what something's like till you get into it, and it can be a lot more interesting than it seems on the outside.
Great, okay, and last question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome.
Do we have time for questions?
Probably time for like one question, so if anyone has something they've been dying to ask. Well, if not, thank you, Professor or General Dunlap, and thank you, Ashley, and thanks to everyone who joined.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.